Me or not. There we are. And I see myself now as well. Good afternoon, Ted. How you doing, man?
Good afternoon. I'm doing well. Thank you. And you?
I'm doing well. We'll be joined by others, but it's so glad to be with you. And today's topic came out of a meeting we had last week. I think you framed it, and that is that we should discuss the changing face, the changing description of COVID-19. And I would like to begin with that consideration. Have you, first of all, introduce yourself again to our audience and your background as a therapist in the profession and your work with not only the African American Child Wellness Institute, but in the healing arts for our community in general. So take a minute to give people Ted Thompson 101 and then lead that into our discussion today. But how we have to be attuned to the conversation, the narrative, the description, the definition of the presence of the shifting presence of COVID-19 and the shifting impact. How do we not become fixated on a particular specific solution one day, knowing that everything is mobile, changing in constant flux? So that's the discussion today. Ted, go ahead.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to join the discussion.
I'm not sure if you have two microphones open or two devices open or not.
Let me see if that helps.
Yeah. And I don't know if you have headsets or anything that you could use. Sometimes that helps a lot, but there's this massive feedback, and typically it means you got two units open at one time.
Yes, I'm trying here.
That's better already. Much better.
Oh, okay. So you can hear me?
Perfectly now. Perfect.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the opportunity to join the program today. I'm going to try to bring a little information to your listening public. Hopefully it will be helpful in trying to assist people in making some knowledgeable decisions about this particular COVID-19 and the vaccine that is available to us. I have long history in health delivery services. At this point in time, I'm in semi-retirement. I'm a life coach, which means I really try to help people in skills development, understanding some issues in conflict resolution, understanding some issues in decision making and critical thinking, just trying to assist in building shall we say, a repertoire of life skills, functional life skills, which help folks day to day. I've been working with the African American Child Wellness Institute, Dr. Bravada Akinsanya and company. And that's been very worthwhile work. We're trying to do outreach to really stretch across the broad metropolitan area to try to bring information as well as materials to individuals, and trying to essentially encourage people to do a little reading, do a little research, to look at the broad spectrum of information that's out there regarding this particular pandemic. As you said just a moment ago, we have received a lot of information, some of which has been very confusing and very contradictory as this pandemic has evolved over time. So that's initially what I would say. Where should we go from here?
Well, talk about what you think people's understanding, the average person, the average resident of our community, neighbor, how does he or she both get information? What are the sources of information? What kinds of information are we getting down at the street level? And how should we be careful in separating out, teasing out that which is accurate versus that which is emotional or just intended, misdirected Uh,
Hmm.
there are all kinds of ways. We use, Facebook a lot. We use Twitter in the community. We use, classic telephone gossip, what I heard at church. So we're getting information
Hmm.
everywhere. The talk shows on TV. Some of us watching Jerry Springer, and Judge Judy, and so all of these ways information comes in, and a lot of it, as you said, is contradictory. So there
That's
must be
right.
a system or
That's
a
right.
process. So talk
And
about how
so,
people are getting information, first of all.
yes, you've mentioned several of those sources. We in general community have lots of associations, and we have our own sources of information. So we're watching the television or listening to the radio, or we have family members that give us information. We have friends that give us information. We have extended family that give us information. There's information that comes from a cultural perspective in community. And so there are lots of different resources, lots of different feed in of information for every member of community. And so it's important then to try to streamline, try to distinguish the credibility, or the, as we say, reliability of the information that you're receiving. And here's the difficult part of that. There are some sources that are trusted more than others.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have a family member that gives you one particular, say, bent or view of this pandemic, you're probably likely to believe them.
Mm-hmm.
There are, of course, some historical factors which affect the community's beliefs about just the intervention of health care in the service of community. We know that there are disparities in the delivery of health care between the Caucasian community and communities of color. We know that there are disparities in terms of healthcare coverage. We know that there are disparities in terms of the way the vaccine has been both promoted and provided to communities of color. And, I have to say this, not only in America, but I'm talking around the world, that individuals of color, communities of color around the world have seen differences in the information that is available, as well as the distribution and availability of the vaccine. So there are many conflicts that people experience, many conflicts that confuse the general public in terms of this pandemic. But there's one thing that we know for sure, and we can just look at the United States. We have 700,000 people. Let me say that again. 700,000 people who have lost their lives in this pandemic, and that's in America alone. This thing is widespread. This thing is a monster, and it is a deadly monster. And we really need to understand and validate that fact in all of the talking that we do. So,
That's powerful, powerful. Thank you for the background. And so, uh, are there tools, techniques that both individuals, families, communities can use? I love the thought, Ted Thompson, of how do we create a protocol. Like I remember in school, the scientific method, for example, right? And it's very specific. You do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5
yes,
steps, and you've
yes.
got a process that you can apply to any number of situations. Is there a protocol, a method that will enable us as individuals and therefore as community to be more discerning when it comes to the massive streams of information, and I say disinformation, that we're experiencing right now?
Yes.
And why is that important, particularly as you described the data that says over 700,000 people in this country have died?
You make a very good point, a very good point. You know, the information that comes to us uh, may be anecdotal. In other words, it's coming from the experience of people. And that experience is also tinged by, affected by the information coming from other people. But that does not necessitate, nor does it ensure that the information is accurate. And you can just go to some of the practices in the area of sexuality. And the point is proven quite readily that just because somebody says one thing about the way two people interact with intimacy does not mean that it ensures safety or health. It can often be a myth. It can be rumor. It can be some cultural norm that is passed forward, but that does not guarantee validity. So I tend to lean toward those individuals in, say, microbiology or epidemiology. I tend to lean toward the scientific community that has literally millions and millions and millions of data points which support the assertions that they make. What is the use of that?
Hello.
It is the repetition of the experimentation. It is the hypothesis offered, the idea, and then the information, the data points, the actual vaccine or the actual understanding of the proteins associated with the virus that allow you to then make a statement that has some kind of validity, some kind of credibility. And so I tend to go to those sources with long years of experience in order to just figure out what's the information that best gives me an idea of which way to go in this pandemic. Once again, I say we need to sort through the information that we receive because this is life and death, and getting it wrong can often result in severe illness and often death.
I see my friend Linda Item was on and is coming back. There she is, Linda. Linda, how you doing? Good to see you.
I'm
Glad
good.
to see you here. And Dr. Bravada Garrett Akansanya is here. Thank you for being here as well. Linda, I haven't talked to you in a long, long time, but it's so good to see you. And I'm glad you're here today. And I want you to just jump right in the conversation. First of all, introducing yourself, describing, your work in community and in the public sector, civic arena, and any points that you can bring into this conversation right now about how our community addresses and deals with the changing face, the changing character of COVID-19.
Well, thank you, Al. It has been a while since I've seen you too, and it's good to see you. Good to see Dr. Thompson and everybody else. I am currently working as a mental health consultant, and I do. So I work in a clinic, and so I do have a lot of information coming, to me about COVID. I think one of the main concerns that I have is how the information is provided, and that the information provided, whether or not it's in a way that will help people make an informed decision. I think there's a lot of conflicting information, and so I think when that happens, people just, especially those who already have some hesitancy when they hear this conflicting information. I think they, in a way, just decide, well, they're not going to do the vaccine because of this conflicting information. And so I think one of the big concerns I have is how do we minimize, the conflicting information so that people hear what they need to hear in order to make a decision about whether or not to get the vaccine. I have a son right now who will not get the vaccine. He took the first dose but refused to take the second one. And it's because of the conflicting information. And there's this cognitive dissonance that you have to try to work through. And so I think a big question is, how do you deal with that, cognitive dissonance? How do you get beyond that so that people hear what they need to hear in order to make a decision about what's best for them? And I don't believe that people are making decision is best for them when they refuse to accept a vaccine that is going to save their life.
Tell me more about the work that you're doing, Linda.
So as a mental health consultant, I actually work with individuals who come into a primary clinic setting and gets identified by their primary care physician as someone needing mental health services. So they get referred to me. I do a diagnostic assessment to determine what their mental health needs are and give them, referral information to get the help that they need. So sometimes we are referring people for therapy, psychiatry, could be chemical dependency. If they have problems regulating their emotions, we might refer them for anger management or some kind of DBT program or other programs. So it really depends on what their needs are, but we try to make sure that we direct them to the appropriate providers for follow-up care. I also provide individual therapy as well on a short-term or long-term basis, again, depending on what the needs are for the patient. And I
want to ask you to take the time to draw the link again. You've done it already, but be very intentional in drawing the link between mental health and COVID-19. Some people want to think that these are two different realms of reality. They think mental health and physical health are two different realms of reality. The truth is there's one body, one being, and our mind and our body are part of the same organism and operate together. And so that separation, from my point of view, as a layman, is artificial. And so as a mental health specialist and practitioner, I would like you to talk about why the consideration of a healthy mind, of mental health, is critical to how people also use their faculties to determine what their requirements are to navigate the COVID-19 world without succumbing to it, without being victimized by it, being healthy, living, not being sick, dying. What do you think, Linda Idem?
Well, one of the things that really stands out for me is that we do try to separate the two, mental health and physical health. And, we see a lot of people that come into the clinic or even to the emergency room where I have also worked, and they may come in with physical symptoms, and when all of the medical things that could be going on are ruled out, it is then determined that they're having an anxiety attack or a panic attack. So people come in with chest pain, chest discomfort, shakiness, sweatiness, and they literally think that they are dying of a heart attack. And it turns out they don't have a heart attack at all, but they are having a anxiety attack or panic attack. And when you have high anxiety or when you're in a state of panic, it is very difficult to make a decision because part of that diagnosis includes indecisiveness. And so if you are living in anxiety, which a lot of people are living in a state of anxiety, it does become difficult to make a decision. And until you address that anxiety and stabilize, it's difficult as well to convince someone that they need to take a COVID shot because they're already in a state of fear about the vaccine already. And to make a decision right then and there when they're in a state of panic about taking a vaccine is likely to cause more anxiety, more fear, and they're going to avoid the conversation. They're going to, shut you down when you even bring it up. So yeah, it is important to address these mental health issues in order for people to be able to make rational, informed decisions about what's best for their health. And it's hard to do that when you're in a state of high anxiety or panic.
Let me pass the talking stick back to Ted Thompson. Ted, go ahead and let's build on this conversation.
I just wanted to add a point that I think
And
Linda
so
Edom has
we
brought.
see a lot of that. We see a lot of people in the state of anxiety.
This particular virus, as well as every other virus, it is the invisible problem. It is the invisible foe. And what that means is if you see, say, a vicious animal like a lion, or if you see some dog that is growling at you, or for some people, if you see a spider, you have a visible opponent. You know that your fear is related to that visible object in front of you, near you, or around you. But a virus is a very different thing in the sense that it is invisible. It is microscopic. You cannot see it. And so you do not know when you are around your friends, your family. You do not know when you go to one of these events, sporting events with a stadium with 70, 80,000 people. You do not know when you go to a concert where people are standing shoulder to shoulder and yelling and shouting and laughing and all of this cumulative population allows the virus, which is invisible, to then spread among the people. We call these super spreaders. And so this invisibility of the virus and it being a deadly thing adds to the general anxiety within the populace. And as Ms. Edom said, anxiety tends to block our ability to think in reasonable, rational ways. The emotionality gets in the way of what we call the prefrontal lobe reasoning centers, the executive function. And so you have more of an emotional reactivity rather than a thought through, conscious, and reasonable, rational approach. So many times the anxiety underlying this experience directs the behavior of people rather than the science.
Let me pass the talking stick to Dr. Ravada Garrett Akansana. You're shaking your head in concurrence. Build on it, please. And good afternoon. Good to see you, as always.
Thank you so much, my brother. And
I think Brenda is backstage. Kelvin, if you're monitoring, you can let Brenda in. And I also sent a note to Michelle Madison, who is a regular on this program. She's out east, I believe. But Michelle, I'll say this to you. maybe if you want to come on the screen, send an email with your email address to kelvin@insightnews.com, and he'll bring you into the conversation. I love your comments, Michelle. You always add to our discussions from online in the comment, and thank you so much. But send it to Kelvin@InsightNews, and we'll see, and we'll bring you under the program as well. Dr. B.
Okay, thank you so much. And I am glad we're finally having this conversation, because what happens is people can't trust the fact that the information changes. They're not being able to integrate and assimilate new information as we garner that information. And somehow in our culture, we think, as in American culture, I'm saying, we think that there should be an instantaneous answer, and it should be finite. That's it. It's either black or white. And all this gray has got a whole bunch of people upset, because one day is this, don't wear masks. One day is can't wear a cloth one, you should wear this kind. But the difference between holding that information and acting on it is the ability to be flexible, to be creative, to be able to dance to the beat of a different drum. And that is one of the core strengths of us as an African people. How on earth do you think we survived if we didn't know how to change up our step? We go in one situation, we change the way we look in another one. We change the way we get our hair done when we go do a job interview. Monday we come in and got braids. When we interviewed, it was straight. We know how to adapt. And what we need to do, of all the people in this country, is recognize our strength and use it to our advantage. So now, my brothers and sisters, if there's one gift that I could bring today, that is, like Papa JB used to say, get on the good foot. Get on the good foot and make sure that you are ready to adapt. We know how to do that. Let's try to do that. That's what the new information is telling us. Adapt, adapt, adapt. And those who can't adapt, those are the ones who are falling prey to the pandemic of the unvaccinated. And with that, I'll pass the talking stick to Brother Yelling.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. And I'm not a clinician, and I think everybody here is the clinician except Mr. McFarlane, myself, and Brenda. Brenda is an educator. So I guess what I need to say and what I'm happy to say is this. You know, when I go to my primary physician on a regular, I only go when I do my annual physical, because thank God I'm relatively very well. Thank God for that. But when I go every year, before I even go, they'll send me a note in my chart. Your so vaccination needs updated. Your this one, you need to update it. You need to update that. What's the difference between this pandemic, COVID-19 vaccinations that we're taking, and all these other vaccinations that we have to take every single day or every single year, and that the doctor tells us, we don't even question the doctor, we just take him. Now, this pandemic of the unvaccinated, we're listening to some other people. We're listening to other sources of information. What is wrong with us? No, seriously, what is wrong with us if we can go to the doctor, or the doctor tells us your vaccination for this hepatitis needs to be updated? You do that, you don't question it. Now, the vaccination that is going to keep you alive, you are questioning it and rationalizing because of your political leanings, of your political idiosyncrasies. I say, well, I'm not going to take it because I read it. So what have you read about the vaccinations the doctor is telling you to take anyway? That you don't question and you just take it.
Can I have a stick back, just please?
Please, doctor, you can have
okay,
it.
So one of the things that I hear is that, and the ironic thing is, a lot of the people who are saying don't take your vaccination have already taken their vaccination. Mm-hmm. You know, the Bible says you can tell a tree by the fruit it bears. If you're supposed to be an orange tree and you ain't dropping no oranges, that ought to tell you right there something's wrong. So we have to look at our pastors. I have clients who say the imam said I shouldn't do it because the white man's murder, and it has transmitters in your body. I hear all of these. Somebody say the pastor said, just pray God will shield you. It doesn't make a lot of sense when God has already provided a way for you to live, because he also gave you common sense. Yes. So I'm gonna pass this to my sister Brenda. I know she can say something about common sense.
Brenda, unmute Brenda.
I can't stop laughing. Dr. B took us to church in a minute. I'm like Brother Yelly now. I just can't understand what people are thinking. And by the way, my second daughter finally took the vaccine, so I'm good. Both of them are vaccinated. But I think there is a problem that is going to arise with the booster. When you have the head of the CDC going over the heads of the FDA and everyone else, my friends are saying, let's put the stoppers on. I took both of the Modernas or whatever, and I'm going to sit back and I'm going to wait. And that was kind of, I think, a blow in the movement of people getting, more people getting the vaccine. Dr. B, one of my questions to you is, scientifically, how can we get this in the classroom? How can we talk to at least high school kids about the scientific background of how all of this came about, who can also translate to their parents and family members or whatever? I always say, I guess, as a former educator, from the mouth of babes. And I think, and it was just like, I'm trying to think of his name with the United Community Mediation Team, but the youth group, and Miles Wilson. And he said, younger people listen to younger people. And so, there has to be a process. If we don't do this real quick, we're going to be adding thousands and thousands when the winter comes. Because now the big question is, well, I've taken both of the shots, or I've taken Pfizer, and now they want me to take the flu shot. They're just having a hard time processing all of these layers, along with, now we've got the rumming up of the voter suppression, and we've got possible debt ceiling problems and all of this, and it's just becoming beyond anxiety. Folks are just like worn out. I know I am. But anyway, that's my take on it. I would love to see the science teachers kind of get together and explain to the young people what this is. We knew about polio, just like Dr. Thompson said, we knew about polio because we saw it. Al and I talk about that all the time. It definitely wasn't visible. We saw people who were born with deformities and all of this.
And the iron lung.
Yeah, and we couldn't wait to line up. Al says it was the gym. I say we were on the playground. But we were lined up at our grade school, and we didn't ask, and our parents didn't ask, but we knew about it. We had studied about polio. We had studied about Jonas Salk. We knew how he did it and how he saved lives. We have to educate. And Yelly talked about that last week. We have to let people know. If we don't give them the information, they'll never find it out from the other side. So I'll pass it back to Brother Al.
I think Brother Ted wanted to speak, so I'll pass it to Ted Thompson.
I hear this question often. I hear the statement often. I'm just going to wait. And my question is, you really need to define what is the point that you're waiting for. What is it that will convince you? Where's that line of demarcation between doubt and certainty that moves you to act in one direction or another? So what are you waiting for? Because honestly, those who wait also take the very high risk that the virus will attack. It shows no preference. It shows no distinguishing now between the elderly, the frontline, the young. We are seeing the transmission of the virus in our school systems. Because up until this point, many of our youth returning to school were not even able to get the vaccine. Now that is changing. But what are you waiting for? Put some clarity to that statement that you make. And I also want to agree with Brenda. I think very clearly the young people, the generation to generation folks who can deliver a message that is science-based will be received and gain more credibility than, say, the intergenerational. You know, when the elders come to the program to speak, the young say, yeah, but y'all are old and we're new and I'm not gonna get this and it's not in my family and it ain't on my block and I don't know what y'all are talking about. This is an invisible foe. This is an invisible enemy. It does not care how old you are or what you have heard. If you are not vaccinated, you are subject to fall seriously ill. We know at this point that 92% of the people who are being hospitalized are the unvaccinated in the country. We know this. And so you are playing Russian roulette with not only your life, but your family's life, your children's life, your relatives' life, simply because you're holding on to some mythical ideology which the virus does not care about. It will simply find a host. I'll give the talking stick back to Brenda.
No, I just wanted to mention that I think we need to consider when we were talking about anxiety, the anxiety of parents, the fact that they have to send their kids back to school, then they're not for sure if the administration and teachers are following all of the protocols, whether they had done anything with air ventilation, all of the different protections and safeties that should be in place at the schools. And then I had one of my former students who is now a parent who said, you know, I'm just worn out with the online. I don't think my, Chad is getting it. And I am concerned. Before COVID, our kids were like 6 to 8 in between months behind. And now they're a year and a half behind. I'm in a state that's number 50 in math and reading. And they have no clue how they're going to get caught up. And a lot of these kids are native. We have 19 Pueblos. And a lot of them, they just don't know where to turn. And they don't have broadband, especially the Navajo Nation. So we think of all of the thousands and thousands of kids that are just not getting what they need to get. But the parents are just like, I can't pay this. We might be evicted. Food prices are going. I can't believe how high coffee is. Oh, I'm going to go to tea. But anyway, I think we need to consider. And Dr. B, a couple of the questions that I have been getting is if you are doing online services and how people can apply? Is there funding for mental health clinicians to help if they need someone to talk to? And it's like Spike Moss said a couple weeks ago, there's still that stigma of mental health. And they don't want their friends to know and this type of thing. But this is serious. We've never faced anything like this. And we need help.
I'm glad you said that. Could I have a talking stick?
Yep.
Okay, because one of the things about the mental health component as we look at COVID is that I have not seen anybody yet, young or old, who didn't know of or hear about or directly experience a death or a serious illness in someone else. I don't know one. And meanwhile, one of the problems we're having is that because of, I'm just going to break it down, racism and disproportionality, and like Brother McFarlane says all the time, people are thriving on our misery.
Yes.
And because of that, BIPOC communities, we tend to be the last one that people consider as being worthy, worthy of mental health, worthy of caring. We are so broke, we can't, there's this joke, we're so broke, we can't afford to have the mental health breakdown that we deserve. So we go around laughing instead of crying, praying instead of dying, but holding on. And one of the things we have to do is recognize that we have a right to mental health. Places like mine, they provide free mental health for children and adults. And one of the other things that we do in the community, we have, I know Brother Ted and Pastor Gillespie did a circle at the church. So we are trying to make sure people, no matter where you are, that you reach out. And if you're having wellness, mental wellness, that's what I call it, because we all are varying degrees of wellness. And if you're having emotional wellness challenges, well, guess what? You're in an emotionally challenging time. And if anybody deserves to have support, it is us. And that's what I always want to just make sure I say, just leapfrog over that stigma that says that you're not worthy. Leapfrog over that stigma that says you can't afford it. Leap over that stigma that says only white people can get mental health. Leap over it. And sometimes you have to do like the Marua parents say, sometimes the problem is yourself. So you have to check yourself and say to yourself, is it worth the risk for me to die? Take this risk and not get my vaccine. Because if I die, what could happen? Not if the thing stops me from having babies in 25 years, or if the thing stops me from, it messes with me later and I'm 65 and my arm gonna break off, or whatever your fear is that's imagined and not seen. What I want to do is invite our community to step over the fear, feel it, acknowledge it, but do it anyway, because courage is not the absence of fear. It is the ability to do what you gotta do, even though you're afraid. So we have to step up and be courageous, because we have generations waiting on us, depending on us. We don't want to raise a generation without elders. And we don't want our babies and our grandbabies and our even grown babies not to know that they have a future. And the only way we can assure that for them is that we are got to be here. So that's my piece of the action that I'm going to share. I want to pass the stick to whoever needs it next. Linda, do you want it? She froze up on me. Okay, so I'll give it to Brother Ted.
Okay.
Sure.
Go ahead, Linda. Go ahead.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So, one of the things I wanted to.
So, Linda, your transmission is freezing. We cannot hear you.
And that's one of the things that really helped me to make the decision about whether or not to take the vaccine. let me go.
That's not going to work, I think. I think we have to just come back to Linda.
Yeah.
So if I might step in for a moment, there's one point that I really want to get across to your listening audience. And that is that, you know, we talk about the coronavirus 19 and we wonder maybe this is a new thing. Oh, okay, so this is a new thing, but the coronavirus is not a new entity. The coronavirus is literally a family of viruses which tend to attack the respiratory system in both humans and in animals. And so what we're really seeing is a virus that is in the same family as the flu.
Mm-hmm.
In 2003, we heard the word SARS. What is SARS? Oh, SARS is upon us. SARS is getting us. It's a coronavirus. And so in 2003, we faced the SARS epidemic. It was not as broad as the Corona 19 virus. The Corona 19 virus is only named 19 because it was discovered in the year 2019, but it is a family of viruses. Many, many millions of people take the flu shot without question every year to avoid the flu. And this virus vaccine does the same. And I just want to add this one little point. We call it a coronavirus simply because the cellular structure is round. It has these little spikes on it, and the spikes basically contain proteins. And so what the vaccine does, it does not, I say again, it does not give you the virus. It does not give you the virus. What the vaccine does is it allows your body to recognize the presence of those proteins, and it pushes forward those systems within your body which create the antibodies to fight off the virus. It does not give you the virus. Never has. No evidence that it does in any part of the world. So that myth must be dispelled in the public. It allows the antibodies to increase. Second point, those individuals who say, but I've already had the virus and now I've recovered, I did survive, there's no need for me to take the vaccine. Not true. What the vaccine does is it boosts those antibodies that now recognize and fight off the virus. So even though you have had the virus and you have survived, it is still very smart for you to go ahead and take the vaccine, because now you will have an increased sense of awareness. Your body can recognize the virus and ward it off, ward off the threat. So important information. And yes, there are individuals who have breakthrough infections, which means there are some people who have been vaccinated who actually contract the virus. Here's the difference. If you're not vaccinated and you contract the virus, there is the likelihood that you will have very severe illness and you may die. With the vaccine, your symptoms are greatly reduced. The chance is you will not have to go to the hospital and you will not die. That's a big difference to look at. So as my sister, Dr. Akinsanya says, get on board, recognize the truth, get on the train, be on the health train, not the insane train.
Ted, say one more word about protocols and being in public, because given all you said, there still is a need to be safe and to mask, because even being vaccinated doesn't mean you will not be impacted by the virus. does not mean that you cannot spread the virus. So
That's
you
right.
still need to be careful. Talk about that part of it as well. And
That's
thank
right.
you,
Well,
thank you for what you've done, because that was a powerful walkthrough and description of the challenge and how the antidote works.
yes, I'm going to go to the bottom line, and the bottom line to me has to do with money.
Hmm.
When this thing struck, we shut down everything. Everything. And so the economics of countries around the world suffered dramatically. We heard story after story, and you can just drive down the street to see the businesses that have lost their ability to thrive or survive because the pandemic shut them down. And so we reached a point when the numbers began to erode, when they began to diminish in frequency. We reached a point where we said, if the economy is going to survive, we need to open up. We need to open up our businesses, our restaurants. We need to open up these sports venues. We need these dollars in order to survive, because the mortgages on these huge pieces of property or on these venues never stops. So we opened up the society again. So part of it was driven by money. And by doing so, we thought at that point that we were on the upside for the virus. But unfortunately, we forgot that the world is not necessarily in tune. And so there is what we call a variant. And so we saw a variant come forward, and the variant then became the dominant strain, and it reinfected. It began to now increase in veracity and transmittability and frequency. And so now we are facing that variant. And actually, there's another variant called the mu variant, which is now emerged, but much less of a threat. But the vaccine still has immunity for even those variants, which means it's better to get vaccinated. The antibodies work against the emerging mutations. If we continue to do what we call emerging toward herd immunity, which is getting at least 70% of the population vaccinated, that reduces the likelihood of a new emerging variant. But we are not controlling what happens in the rest of the world. And that is also important to note, that where the vaccine is less available, you have greater probability that a new emerging variant will occur. The virus wants to survive, and it mutates in order to survive. So you, as a citizen in America who have access to the vaccine, save yourself. Listen to the science. It is not wise at this point to go into heavily populated arenas or heavily populated venues, shoulder to shoulder, table to table, because we still have the variant out there. And so it is important that you mask up. It is important that you use some social distancing. It's important that you have the vaccine. Do what you can do to protect yourself, your family, and others from the unseen enemy that we are confronted with.
Can I add real quick, just one note to Ted?
Go ahead.
We also have to stay healthy.
Yes.
We have to exercise. We
Yes.
have to eat right.
Yes.
We have to get the amount of sleep. We have to have inside of us enough to fight, even
Yes.
having the vaccine. Health is going to be primary.
Absolutely.
This morning on The View, I didn't see this, but my wife told me about it. They were expecting a visit from Vice President Kamala Harris, right? And so at the time of the show, when she was supposed to come on, before that, they asked two of the hosts to leave. And the two hosts were Sunny Hoiston, I think her name is, a Black attorney who's on there.
Yes.
And also Anna I'll think of her last
Navarro.
name, Navarro.
Navarro.
And apparently when they came back, they announced that both Anna and Sonny had tested positive for COVID-19. And rather than bring the vice president into the studio as they normally would, they did the interview from another room. But that just tells you, how present and how, difficult and how near this catastrophe is, that right there where you think they've practiced, and had the protocols, but they probably have some travel involved and interaction. Somehow these two hosts had COVID, and at this point were in effect putting the vice president at risk. And they fortunately tested and averted that situation.
Yes.
That's how big this thing is. Also, let me close with this. We're out of time. This has been a great show. As you were speaking, Ted, you reminded me of a song that my brother wrote that I used to use as part of the program when we were broadcasting from the studio at KFAI. And you kept saying, what are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? And that struck a note with me, because he has a song called "The World Is Now," and the hook in the song is "The world is now. What are you waiting for?" And so we're going to close with that message. The world is now. Now is the time. This minute is the minute that matters.
That's right.
What are you waiting for? I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time.
Oh, Queen Justice, where are you? Did they beat you up or no? Lock you on the ground, take the crown away from you?
Oh, Lady Liberty, red, white, and blue. Did they take your dignity with their bigotry? Teach you that you're born to lose.
Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
Of all the rules you break,
We've had enough
of all the money you make.
We've had enough
No more life at stake.
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation.
It's been 400 years and we're 400 late. Together we stand from state to state. Going back in time won't make America great. We need justice now, people won't wait.
Action, no more distraction. Every step we take, we gain traction. If it can happen to one, it can happen to all. United we stand, divided we fall. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
Of all the rules you were breaking.
We've had enough
Of all the money you were making.
We've had enough
No more life gets taken.
We've had enough
This is a proclamation.
Free or guilty,
It's gonna get filthy. You better believe.
just roll up your sleeves.
It's gonna get rough. It's gonna be tough. We all agree.
We've had enough. We've had enough of all the rules you're breaking. We've had enough all the money you're making. We've had enough. No more life gets taken. We've had enough. This is the proclamation.
We've had enough. Trayvon Martin and Tommy Rice.
We've had enough.
Michael Brown and Eric gonna pay the price.
We've had enough.
Philando, Breonna, George Floyd.
What? We've had enough.
So many gone. How can we fill the void?
How could we feel?
We had enough. John Crawford, I know you've heard.
We've had enough.
Sandra Bland, come on and take a stand.
We've had enough.
Sean Bell,
Sean Bell.
what the hell?
We've had enough.
Freddie Gray, did you hear what I said?
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation.